Welcome to 3 Night Weekend, a new podcast from Sifted Games at sifted.net, where we talk to gaming industry luminaries and help you plan your weekend to come. I'm Shane Satterfield, and you can find me on Twitter at Dinfire. The show goes live every Friday morning for our patrons and the following Monday for everyone else. If you want to listen when it's at its full power, head to patreon.com/sifted and pledge at least $4 per month. This week, we're talking with Adam Sessler. He's been covering video games for over 20 years at outlets like G4 and Rev3. He took a detour to found his own data company and has recently returned for the revival of gaming TV network G4. All right, and here we are with the one, the only Adam Sessler. It is truly a privilege to catch up with you, in all honesty, Adam. You and I have been so busy, literally over like the last few years, that we really haven't had a chance to catch up. You're living up in the Bay Area. I'm living in LA. There's a pandemic going on. I'm glad that 3 Night Weekend has facilitated a reuniting of our minds.
No, which is good, because it usually came down to, oh, cool, it's E3. I'm going to go to Michael Pachter's party, and then I can see Shane.
Yeah,
that
I'm
was
the
one time I knew I could run into you.
We're going to catch up on everything that's happened.
Exactly.
We're going to share all our opinions on the big games that have come out since we saw each other. I do miss that. I mean, I miss Pachter's party just for so many reasons, not the least of which, obviously, is catching up with you. But I'm glad we're doing it now.
Yes.
Obviously, the big news for you, and we'll get to it eventually, is that you are a part of the reformation of G4. Are you excited about that?
Yes, I am very excited. I love the fact that you're using the term reformation.
Yeah.
It has this historical significance where we've recalibrated political and religious alignments in Europe.
I mean, is it that far off?
No, probably not. And I think to a lot of people out there, I've realized it's absolutely that. So.
Yeah. And look, so 3 Night Weekend, it is all about games. Obviously, we talk to luminaries from the games industry, but we also want to get to kind of know people on a deeper level and let their fans kind of understand them on something other than, hey, what game do I like or do I not like?
Yes.
And I think for most people, at least most people our age in the gaming industry, we kind of got into it by accident. Not a lot of people our age were like, I want to work in the games industry and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to get into it. And then they did it. A lot of people just kind of fell into it. Adam, how did you end up in games?
Oh, it was more by accident than it had any reason to be. I was a banker. So I started, I went to UCLA from 91 to 95, and I was an English major. And then I graduated, and this was that period of time, especially in Southern California, because there had been a recession, and then because of the LA riots, LA was even in a slower rebuilding of their economy, and so there was this mantra everywhere you heard, when you were young, which is, you're not going to find a job when you graduate.
Yeah.
And as a result, when I was offered a job by a large international bank, and this isn't as a teller, this is as like a credit analyst. When I was offered that gig, it was like, oh, well, I better take it because I'll never get another job offer again for the rest of my existence, or that's what they're telling me on the radio. Yeah. So I got it. My piece of advice to a lot of people is try not to be a banker.
Yeah.
It's
not the most direct way to get into the gaming industry.
So after about 2.5 years, I thought I was going to take an accounting class. I mean, this was grim. I mean, it was just, and I think it's another thing, and I do pass this on as a piece of advice to young people, that your sense of time when you're young is all screwed up, because you can only understand time by the amount of time that you've lived.
That's true.
And so every year when you're 20 is 1/20th of your existence. And it's very hard to conceive with the fact that what you're doing at, say, 22 can change and change dramatically. So you think you're just kind of committed to that path. I definitely felt that way. So the one thing I was doing to alleviate a lot of this misery was I was doing it was called public access. You know what that is.
Yes.
It was before
I think
the
it still
internet
exists, actually. I think public access TV is still out there in the rural parts of America, maybe.
Well, no, I don't think anyone watches anymore, but I mean, it's mandated by the government, who owns the majority of the broadcast airways, not cable, that some of it has to be made available to the public, and that's what a public access station is. And this was YouTube content before YouTube.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah. And I did a comedy show with a bunch of friends, and it was fun. And I was, I'd done theater before when I was in high school, and I did a little bit in college. And so that was working out. And then through a friend of a friend, I think of a friend, there was a girl who I knew very well, her boyfriend's roommate. That's right, Trent. He was at GameSpot, and I'm blanking on his last name. I probably shouldn't even use it because someone will Google it. Anyway, Trent. I had met him. They're like, yeah, I'm working on this TV show for this new station called ZDTV. You should come by and try out. So I go to this tryout, and it's just a bunch of people who looks like they know each other.
And
Yeah, and
probably
I'm like,
did.
oh, great. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it's like, this is the 90s at San Francisco. So everyone's kind of dropping these little stories to make themselves look more relevant than I think
important.
they were. And I'm like, whatever, okay. And I'm still going to stick around and do this audition. And so I did. But before I did the audition, turns out the woman who was running the public access station was the director of the auditions. She's like, hey,
perfect.
Oh, Adam. No, you're going to do just fine. I'm like, all right, things are starting to shape up.
Yeah.
So I get out on the set. There's, copy in the prompter, and I read it. I have my enthusiasm. And then they asked me the question, what games are you playing right now? Which I was not. Other than the game of let's go out every night and try to find a girl, there was just no games I was playing.
Yeah, so you weren't playing games at all up to that point in your life.
In my life, yes.
You had played them like
with
earlier.
Any type of deal. Yeah, exactly. Once I hit college, my neighbor had a Super Nintendo. But I didn't have a game system or anything like that.
So you had like a 5-year window where you weren't playing a lot of games.
Yes. So the majority of the Genesis SNES era is pretty lost on me, unless it's Super Mario World or
the big ones.
Super Street Fighter 2. That I played just ridiculously. I was an E-Honda guy.
Nice.
Because of the milking.
Which means you still are an E-Honda guy.
Yeah, okay, that's true. So they're like, what games are you playing? And I had done a little bit of research. So I said Resident Evil 2. And then there's this other game that everyone told me to mention. And, it had this absurd and nonsensical title as far as I was concerned. So what I meant to say was Final Fantasy VII. I don't know what came out of my mouth. I know by the look on their face, they're like, really? Never heard of Final Friends or whatever it was.
That sounds really fun.
So now I'm like, oh, I'm losing it. And then everything got quiet, and the stage manager was like, hold on. So they would like you to river dance.
What?
Now, on the public access show, one of my favorite sketches that we had done is I would play a version of Michael Flatley of Riverdance fame. Once again, kids, you're gonna have to look this one up. It's Irish people with very stiff torsos but kicking a lot.
Yeah.
And so the whole shtick is Michael Flatley's teaching a community college Riverdance class, and I just kept on jumping off camera with a new shirt unbuttoned to my navel, which is that like he would always have this leering look on his face with this unbuttoned shirt while kicking his legs. That was it. That was the sketch, and so I did that. And I learned afterwards, they're like, yeah, that's how you got the job.
Wow.
And so I got it. They're like, we need you to play more video games. I'm like, that is
fine.
Done. And yeah, just the fun part is that games were kind of consistent with how like stuff I was enjoying doing in college in the final years. I love reading literature, but I love the idea of analyzing pop culture.
Yep.
Because it was more relevant. It was more popular, and the idea that it's kind of infused with what's happening at the time. And you can get a better understanding of society from watching, say, a John Woo movie or maybe not Judge Dredd.
At that point, games were the emerging pop culture.
Yeah,
exactly. Before that, games were kind of this thing that, I hate to say it, but for most people looked at it like that's a nerd activity.
Oh, yeah.
Is something kids do. And that was the transition away from that to where it became socially acceptable for older players to play games.
And it was like, so I started in 98, and boy, if there was ever a year for video games, I started in the middle.
Well, you hit the ground running, buddy.
And I think people were saying like, it's not usually this awesome.
I'm trying to just set expectations.
Unreal had come out. I mean, okay, here's the part that's really funny. The game that was supposed to be the biggest game of the year was Sin from Ritual.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
And that was probably the one that, it came and went. But Unreal came out that year. Half-Life came out that year. Ocarina of Time came out that year. Banjo-Kazooie had come out that year.
Metal Gear.
Yeah, I mean, it was this just kind of endless parade.
Yeah.
And I think as a result of that year, and especially Half-Life, which just kind of hit pop culture in such a significant way, it finally started to emerge, I guess, from the shadows and into something that was going to become ever more, kind of popular. And then, I would say by the time, I would say 2010, maybe even earlier, I would say that the game console in a home was as ubiquitous as what a VCR was back in the 80s for us.
Yeah.
It was going to be there.
Yeah. So how did you end up on extended play? The first, is that what you had auditioned for?
The first, no, it was GameSpot TV.
Okay. And who was your co-host on that?
So it was Lauren. At the time,
Fielder,
it was Lauren
right?
Fielder.
Joe
yes.
Fielder's wife.
I know that she's out there under a different last name, and so I'm trying to remember that. So
Joe Fielder was the editor-in-chief of GameSpot at that time.
At the
and
time.
Lauren was his wife. Yeah.
Yes, and she was working on it. And the thing was, we were taking our content from GameSpot. And this goes back to the Ziff Davis aspect of ZDTV. They were trying to tap into their resources, which were fairly extensive at the time, to be able to sort of pull the expertise and pull the content. So
my first job was at ZD, and my first job was, quote, magazine editor. And my job was to take magazines like EGM and create a website for them.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was supposed to be a full-time job, and I would get all 4 of the magazines done in like 2 days. And they're like, what's this guy doing just sitting around? They're like, can he write? And I was like, I actually have a journalism degree and ran a gaming website for 3 years before. And they just started giving me work, and that's how it all started for me too. So,
I to your point, when I found out these jobs existed, it was really like, really? Really? Huh. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, like the original GameSpot was run out of it was out in the avenues here, and it was office in the vaguest sense possible.
I did not work there. By the time I started working at ZD, they had already moved into the 8th and Townsend building with Sega,
which is where Tech TV was,
and ultimately where Tech TV was. Yeah.
So it started as GameSpot TV. It became Extended Play, really because it had to get renamed. Paul Allen had bought ZDTV, so it was no longer formally associated with Ziff Davis, even though there was, I believe, still a connection between Extended Play and GameSpot. I might be wrong on that.
I don't think so.
Yeah, do we have to then do our own editorial? I'm just remembering the level of staffing that we had, and I don't know how we reviewed those games.
I know we had no involvement with it. I know that. Yeah. I was working at GameSpot. We had nothing to do with your show other than that guys around the office.
Yeah, we were always in. So it's ancient history.
It really is.
It really is.
Seems like yesterday to me, but it really is ancient history.
So it becomes Extended Play, and it's pretty much the same show. It's a fairly tame once.
Now, was Lauren still co-hosting, or did they get a new?
No. Then they brought on Kate Patello.
Okay.
So for a while, yes, they brought on Kate. I think. Yeah, did I do it alone for a bit? I did alone for a little bit, but I don't think it was. Yeah, they brought on Kate. Then, and
you were filming the wraps at the Metreon, right?
Yes,
like the arcade,
started
Sony's
at the
arcade
studio,
at the Metreon, yeah.
Among other places.
Yeah.
They decided to save money by not using the studio because you have to pay, a crew and staff. And so not only did we do Metreon, but prior to that, we were going to every random, like if it was a gas station that had a cabinet that didn't work, we might end up shooting there. And sometimes it was like squeezing blood from a stone to kind of justify the relevance of where we were. And also we would shoot on Fridays. And back in the late 90s, it was like San Francisco was kind of hopping. Like the entire Bay Area was. It was the first
insane.
Internet boom.
When I moved there, it blew my mind.
And so, but we kept on going to the South Bay and get stuck in Friday evening traffic coming back up. And I'm like, no, I want to see my friends. I want to go out.
Yeah.
And you're just stuck in some of the worst traffic that you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. So it becomes Extended Play. That goes on for a while. And then you came on when it was still Extended Play, correct?
Yeah. So you and I met each other out in just around the office, basically, because I was working at GameSpot. You were in the garage. You were working at Tech TV, and we both loved 3D platformers.
Exactly. And I know
you and I would sit and talk about like Banjo, Super Mario 64, Conker's Bad Fur Day.
We review Conkers at the same time. I was remembering earlier today, knowing I was going to be on this show. There's that bit in the club with the cavemen.
Yep.
Where you have to pee on them and then you have to roll them up. But there's this tiny little ramp. And because of the crappy N64 graphics, you couldn't tell that there was actually different levels.
Yeah.
So I spent like a whole day unable to solve this puzzle. I'm like, can someone sneak me in the GameSpot? I got to talk to Shane, see if he's figured this out.
Yeah. And then, and so we bonded over that. And then the .com bubble popped in 2001. And GameSpot laid off like half the staff. And basically it was last in, first out. And I was like one of the last hires that they had made. So I was laid off. And I remember it was awful because I had like spent my graduation money to move out there because GameSpot gave me like $1,000 to relocate or something like that. So all the graduation money I got from college, I spent to move out there. I had been there for like a year and a half and I had lost my job. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is a nightmare. I still have a lease for the next 6 months at an amount of money that was like mind blowing to me at the time. And you saved the day. You just came to me. You're like, we're looking for an editorial person. You want a job? And I was like, hell yeah.
And we really, really needed them.
You saved my ass.
Oh, well, that's incredibly kind.
No,
you saved our ass too. I mean, somebody's like, oh, what do you mean these games arriving with enough time to review them and be timely?
And I came in and started doing editorial, and extended play lasted about another. And that's the thing. So I got there. We worked together for like 5 or 6 months, I think it was, on extended play, and then we got the mandate that, look, we need to change this show or the show's going to be canceled. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, here I go again. Yeah. And then we were tasked with creating X-Play and we did it. And
so, I mean, the Tech TV was in dire straits. I think that Paul Allen, who's no longer with us.
Yep. I don't know.
Sorry, I don't have a strong opinion. I don't think he was the greatest of people. I'll be frank.
Okay. I couldn't figure out what you were insinuating there. So
yeah, I'm just like, he's not here. He was an insanely rich human being who could buy things.
Yeah,
and one of them was a TV station.
Yeah,
and sometimes TV stations just bore people the way that maybe you or I might get bored with. I don't know, say an Assassin's Creed game 2/3 of the way through. Except when you stop playing with the TV station, people's jobs are suddenly on the line.
People's lives, yeah.
Yeah. And there was some stuff like that was happening. The internet, collapsed. The whole idea that we were doing live news for 8 hours, they had to cut back on that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other problem is, and I know people have horribly romantic memories of Tech TV, and I'm not going to try to disabuse them of it, but gaming was a little off to the side of kind of the direction that so many of the other shows were going.
Yeah, I felt like we were kind of an outcast on Tech TV.
Yeah.
People didn't treat us that way. Like, they were cool to us and like...
No, yeah. We weren't the redheaded stepchild that was living in the fruit cellar. We were actually allowed to the table, but our portions weren't as good.
Yeah, it felt like we were like the afterthought in the network until we launched X-Play.
Yeah. And then in an effort to try to really revitalize the network, and I believe this is post Paul Allen, they brought in, he did pass away a few years ago, and I'm blanking on his name, a wonderful president who was like, okay, we're going to kind of supercharge and we're going to get more edgy. We're going to go for a more youthful audience. And
it was very dry. Tech TV was very dry and played it straight. And there's a place for that, but
there's a place for it. But when you're talking about pop culture, it's kind of, it can be tough. And we were living under the mandate, forgot about this.
Yeah.
Where we couldn't show people shooting people in video games.
Right. Yeah.
This was post Columbine.
Yeah.
And when the biggest game in the history of games up until that point was Grand Theft Auto 3,
it makes it hard.
You're suddenly like, you're really challenging. Yep. So all of that got to go out the window. We were going to have late night. We could be a lot saucier, I'm going to say.
Which isn't it crazy to think about that now? That they're like, okay, your show's going to air like after 9 o'clock. So now you can show like people shooting guns. When you think about YouTube now, you can watch it 24 hours a day. Like, it wasn't that long ago, Adam.
And my memory is it had less to do with advertisers. It had more to do with a very conservative. And I think they maybe thought that they were going to be selling the station to like the home and garden people, where that really is like a strong, like that, like they don't mention death or anything. Nothing grim is going to happen on like Curbside Appeal or whatever those shows are called. Which the first time I heard it, I'm like,
My Shed, like a red or whatever one of those shows are. Yeah.
So, and the part that, and once again, their focus was on Unscrewed with Martin Sargent.
Yeah.
Like that was their
They
talk
thought that was going to be the big hit. Yep.
And as a strange benefit, even though we felt like once again they're kind of pushing us over to the side, we were able to create X Play without anyone really paying too much attention.
Yep.
And
we had an EP, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah, we made the first few shows, and it was the highest rated thing in the history of the network. And
like immediately,
immediately, like immediately.
I remember we couldn't believe it. Like we got the ratings back, and we're like, "Are those right?" Like,
well, remember they had to create a new color because it was
kind
of like the terror alerts.
Because up until that point, the screensavers just ruled Tech TV. Like nobody could even fathom that a show could knock off the screensavers. Because look, let's be honest, the whole studio was screensavers. Their set was gigantic. They had like 10 people on set scurrying all over the place. It was Leo's show. He was the big star of the network, even though you wouldn't know it by knowing him. Like he was great. Like he didn't have like the huge ego that you would expect, but still,
well,
we never fathomed that we would outrate that show.
Good experience from radio because that's where he cut his teeth.
Yeah,
that it is one of those things where it's like you could put him in almost any setting, and he knew how to adapt to it. Because with radio and with TV, but really with radio, dead air is just anathema.
No, yeah,
and so you just learn that skill, like fill
how to fill it. Yeah,
fill.
Look, I'll be honest with you. I had just started in TV when you gave me the job. I had been doing some video stuff at GameSpot.
I remember that, yeah.
But you and Leo were the first people I ever worked with where I understood what talent was.
Right.
Like the first time I went into the voiceover booth with you, blew my mind. I don't think people appreciate how hard it is to read a teleprompter or to go into a voiceover booth with a script and read naturally. And I'll just always remember the first time I went into the voiceover booth with you, I was like, okay, I get it now. I understand why he's on camera and I'm behind the camera. And that was an eye-opener for me, and it was good. And Leo was the same way. Like the way he performed, I was like, "You're talent. Like you're better than me at this stuff." And there's a reason you're on camera.
Well, and it's also like your job is you've got to do this correctly with as few attempts as possible because you can't slow down the process. The prompter stuff, this is going to be interesting. Sort of going forward with the new G4, because prompter reading is hard.
It is hard, really hard.
The full sentences, you probably get about 5 words typically in the prompter, and so it creates a break in what you're reading that isn't natural.
That you're not supposed to observe, honestly.
I mean, the trick I've found over time without even trying to do it is where my eyes are is about 5 words ahead from what's actually coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I'm almost reading diagonally where it's like, okay, if that word's there, I'm just going to guess what the other words are that might have to kind of be in the middle of that.
It's a skill, and not just anyone can do it. Absolutely.
No, and I regard it the same way I regard a lot of streamers out there where I'm like, I have no idea how you're doing this.
Yeah.
Like
you mean as far as like playing a game very well and staying engaged with the audience at the same time?
And then doing it for hours on end.
Yeah.
Which is just, I'm like, this is,
I think it's insane. I'm glad somebody can do it. I'm not one of them.
I can always feel the discs in my back when I see someone doing that.
All right. Let's move on to sort of what happened when, G4 and Tech TV is essentially sold to Comcast.
Yeah.
And everyone who works at Tech TV in San Francisco, not everyone, but most of the people who worked on shows were basically given the choice of you can move to LA and continue working on your show or not. And the X-Play team, we all of us, I think, was there anyone who didn't move?
There were a few. Carrie, there were a few people who were, because they gotten married maybe, or were going to be setting up lives up in San Francisco, weren't ready to do that move down there. I mean, what was
most
really
of us went to LA.
Most of us went, especially from X-Play, because it was. Well,
because we were having fun making the show.
We were having fun making the show.
We were a family, man. Like I loved everybody that we worked
so much
with.
Fun.
Like they were my brother or sister, It's like
and we all kind of like went down there together. All of us really apprehensive about it.
We were.
Like, okay,
all of us were like, well, look, we can move back if we hate it down there.
And we were in the most secure position. What we have now learned since
we were in the top rated show on the network,
and that was a gaming-centric channel.
Yep.
They really bought Tech TV for X-Play and all the subs that Tech TV had because
that had like 47 million homes, and they were at like 20 something. Yeah.
Exactly. And then
And we found that out very quickly when they started cutting shows.
Well, yeah, and I don't want to sound like it was as craven as it was, although it may very well have been.
It kind of was.
Is that they wanted those subs, but they would be kind of violating contracts with the cable providers if they completely changed Tech TV overnight. That it had to be kind of a slow bleeding, to kind of satisfy various contracts as well, to try to maintain as much of the audience as they possibly could. And what really sucked is there were so many people that moved down there that found themselves kind of without a job within months.
Martin Sargent's show was called Screwed. Unscrewed, but they ended up
they dropped the on. Yeah, I mean, it was
everyone on that show got screwed hard.
Yeah,
they literally moved down to LA and were here for I don't know what, like 4 months before.
I mean,
not even been that long.
I'm trying to remember that. Trying to recall this morning. Yeah,
it wasn't very
something long. Maintained that was the screensavers before it became Attack of the Show. That's the part where it gets a little fuzzy.
They lasted a little longer.
Yeah.
Screensavers before it switched over to Attack of the Show. But then a lot of people who worked on screensavers, not all of them made it through the transition to Attack of the Show.
No. It was, I mean, there were times I know that I felt just kind of guilty because we were kind of skating along.
Because we
doing things that made everyone happy.
We weren't forced to like interact with a lot of the G4 folks. It wasn't that we didn't like them.
Yeah.
We had like our own corner over by the edit bays, and we just kind of kept doing our thing. It didn't feel that much different. We had better facilities. We had more resources.
We had editors that were 10 feet away.
I mean, it's literally just walk into the edit suite and work on stuff.
We didn't have that in San Francisco, and I cannot tell you how life-changing it was. Like, I'm going to go check and see the progress on the package I'm working on.
Instead of having to hop on a shuttle and ride a shuttle like 3 miles over to our studio like we did at Tech TV.
Yeah.
And then the other folks on like the other shows, they were kind of forced to integrate with the people from G4 who were already there. And look, they were all great people, but it's still awkward. Like when you...
Yeah.
When we got there, it felt like it was like us versus them in some ways, because no one could figure out like which shows are going to last, which ones are going to get cut. And it was
like two very different cultures.
Yeah.
There was suspicion, apprehension. I remember that I was trying to be like, okay, I would be asked to go on like G4TV.com, which was their talk show with, I think it had Laura Foy and Tina and Kevin.
Jeff
Keighley and Jeff. I completely forgot about Jeff Keighley. He was doing stuff on the network as well. And I know that, like, not you, but some other people on XPlay are like, what are you doing hanging out with the others? And it was like, oh, God, I just want,
I crossed the line, too. I'll be honest with you. Like, I really liked a lot of the people that we met at G4. And I was like, I get why some of you guys are apprehensive, but like, if you get to know them, they're awesome.
And a lot of it had to do,
they're really cool
they
people.
weren't management. That's the thing, is that, man, that merger was handled. I mean, it is
very poorly.
Textbook how you do not do it.
Yep.
And I
remember they had like the logo at first that had like Tech TV connected to the G4 logo. And that was that whole period that you were talking about where they couldn't just jump straight to the new G4 because they would lose all the subscriptions. And so we had that weird logo that existed for like a
G4
while.
Tech TV.
And then once they finally cut all the shows from Tech TV, that's when they just went back to the old G4 market.
Yeah, it was. I mean, look, this is a completely run-of-the-mill pedestrian story in the world of LA and television.
Yeah, I mean, it just happens all the time.
But it was definitely the first time any of us had experienced it on that kind on that kind of a level, and it was. It's always unfortunate to have something that bitter kind of be the beginning of your relationship.
Yep, it's true.
Of what happens.
But then all the dust settled, and we just plowed along with XPlay, and we started doing like groundbreaking stuff. Like we started doing like the first live broadcasts of E3 press conferences, the first like 3-day live coverage of E3. We broke so much ground there. Kind of once everything got figured out, we just started, and they started getting behind us with budgets and stuff, and they're just like, "Hey, what do you guys want to do?" And we're like, "We should do this."
Yeah, I mean, the E3 one was huge.
That's
and
huge.
It was slowly also, and this is true going back to Tech TV, but like, in the way that we were sort of the redheaded stepchild, but a lot of, even at G4 in the early times, there was like, this game thing is big. But usually you have people running things that didn't really understand why, and were a little bit apprehensive about it again. And so it's like, how do we capitalize on that with not necessarily covering it?
Yep.
And it took something like the E3 coverage and the numbers it could bring in for that wake up call where it's like,
The light bulb went off.
oh,
Yeah.
hold on. If we, these games thing, people really will take their week off.
Yep.
That's one thing I used to hear, that GeForce coverage of E3, people were like, okay, I'm taking my vacation so I can just watch all this nonsense all day long.
Yep.
Which, thank you, because I think it broke all of us to try to make it. So
it was
great
hard.
to know.
I mean, back then, especially because technology wasn't what it is now. We were using tape.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to do this stuff now because everything's just an MP4. Back then, everything was on tape. It's like if you would go to a booth to get B-roll from a publisher, they'd hand you a tape.
Yeah. Which you then had to ingest.
Now they just send you an email with a link to download all the stuff, and in 5 minutes, it's ingested into your system, and you're firing it off on your TriCaster. Like, it wasn't like that back then. We had to do so much hard work to make that happen.
And there were live bears on the floor, so you had to be running in terror of them as well.
But look, things went great for a long time. The X-Play continued to be the top-rated show on the network, but at the same time, Attack of the Show finally started rating well. And so we really had like 2 flagship shows, both with their own style, both with their own content, but both shows that I think you could watch no matter how much you kind of enjoyed what they were talking about. I think that was kind of the through thread between the 2 shows. And then I left there in 2006.
Okay, that's what I was trying to remember, is what year that was.
Yep.
Okay.
I left in early 2006. I went over to MTV. They had their new startup game trailers. And then you guys kept going. I think I helped produce like 300 and some episodes of X-Play before I left. And then you guys just kept plowing, man.
We eventually made it to 1,000.
That is just amazing. Not many shows in the history of television can say that they made it to 1,000 episodes.
I mean, there's like Entertainment Tonight.
Stuff like that, though. Like America's Funniest Home Videos. Like shows like that are the ones that make it that far. MASH. I don't know if MASH made 1,000. I don't think they did.
No, I don't think MASH, because even at, 30-something episodes a season.
No, they didn't do it.
Get close.
They didn't even get close to that. So that's quite an achievement. And so I was over at Game Trailers, and look, we stayed in touch the whole time because we see each other at events, we see each other at E3, always talking shop. I mean, I always knew we were going to be friends for the rest of our lives. And then I remember I guess it was GDC 2012.
It was 2012.
I came up to San Francisco for GDC, and I got off my flight and I got in my cab, and I was riding the cab up to San Francisco, and you called me. And I'll never forget this phone call. I go, hello? You're like, Shane. And I'm like, what? And you go, you're not going to believe what these motherfuckers are doing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, they're forcing me off my own fucking show. And I was like, what are you talking about, dude? Yeah. You're like, I'm leaving X-Play. And I'm like, you can't leave you are X-Play. And I'm like, just calm down. I'm like, surely there's a misunderstanding. You're like, there's no misunderstanding. And you just hung up the phone. And I was like, what? And I tried to call you back, and you
I don't think I hung up on you. I think I lost the connection, but obviously it was at a perfectly dramatic. Yeah. I mean, at that point it hadn't happened. I mean, it's welcome to Hollywood. You hear things about you before it happens.
Yep.
I was going up to GDC, and I was not working on camera, which is how I knew.
That's a pretty good sign.
Yeah, that's a pretty good sign. And I wanted to keep going because I needed to go figure out what was happening.
Yep.
I remember spending a long period of time with Warren Spector and his wife. Where I'm like, what should I do with my career? What should I do? And he goes, and he was always been wonderful to me. And he's like, hey, do you want to see Epic Mickey 2?
Yes, I do. In fact, I do want to see it.
And I'm like, I actually really want to see this game. And then the boom came down. Not that much longer afterwards. I think it was in a week or two. It happened, and those things.
And what happened exactly?
I don't know.
Do you even know?
No.
I mean, that's the other thing about working in entertainment. A lot of times you don't get the answer.
No. I think there were some personality disputes. What I do know is the show itself was on insanely shaky ground.
Well, the show had changed at that point. It had become more of an Entertainment Tonight.
Yeah,
you guys were doing 3 or 4 episodes a week instead of
doing more. Yeah, it was.
And so it became difficult to have sketches in every episode, and it just kind of become this show where you and Morgan stood on stage and just kind of tossed to packages. You guys weren't as involved in as many packages as you were
Yeah, and I mean, there was cost cutting. There had been some layoffs. They had thrown a ton of money at us to go to an hour-long show multiple times during the week, which that changed everything. I did not work out as well, and so then they suddenly cut the staffing, and now we still had the same number of shows. I think we went back to the half hour, but now it was like just getting something to air with the staffing as it was.
Yeah.
Was like, it kind of crimped what the how creative you could be. In addition, and this was the big one, was the Comcast purchase of NBC.
Yeah.
And the decision then was to have NBC come in and kind of call most of the shots, because obviously they had the experience working television.
Yep.
And that's where G4 as the video game channel started to it was not, it was hard for a lot of people to get their heads wrapped around things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I forgot, this was the
they
really
moved you
big
out
one.
of the offices, right?
The offices
into E Studios, right?
Oh, that had happened a while before.
Yeah.
But
that's a big deal. I mean, you're taking out of your home and you're
closer
putting
to my apartment.
It's closer to your apartment, but
yeah,
you guys didn't have the resources at that point that you had before.
And we couldn't shoot in the building the way we could do all those office sketches, back in that day. But with the with the NBC purchase, what this did is it really angered DirecTV. And DirecTV was the most appealing thing about Tech TV when G4 bought it, because at that point it had a ridiculous number of subs and they have been struggling to get that. So just because DirecTV had been the largest distributor when ZDTV started, we had kind of a disproportionate number of viewers that were DirecTV.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So when DirecTV resented the fact that Comcast now had the whole NBC family, and they could use that to negotiate fees with cable providers, DirecTV decided to take a shot across the bow. G4 was the first network to be up for that negotiation, and boom, they dropped us, and our viewership just cratered.
Well, yeah, of course.
And that started this process of, okay, how much, are they carrying G4?
The beginning of the end, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, and you could tell. And so we all felt that there was something coming collectively.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that something was coming personally as well, and I would vacillate, like, are they going to get rid of me? Are they going to get rid of the show? They went with me first.
And
I think that was, in all honesty, and once again, I do not know. I think that was an attempt that maybe I was the one dragging the show down.
Right.
But as I said, I think
they probably figured out quickly that was not the case. Yeah.
But yeah, it's unpleasant. It wasn't fun.
Yeah.
It did provide me with one of the strangest summers of my life, where I was just kind of like,
aimless.
Yeah, I'm just like, let's go hang out at Canners again.
Were you still under contract for a while after you left? You were. So you were making money and didn't have to work.
Exactly. Which kind of it's with that in mind that,
that can be a
lot of
blessing
times
or
they want to
curse.
get as much out of you as possible, and then the minute your contract's up, it's bye-bye.
Yeah.
But this is like, I think that, maybe they can, do one more thing. That Esquire channel stuff that eventually happened was...
Didn't you work on like a viral video show for a while or something?
Oh, with Kevin Pereira? That was for a hot minute.
Oh, yeah. It didn't last long, I think.
Yeah. No. There are two things that absolutely hurt that show is...
because it could have been the first ridiculousness or whatever.
and one of the shows, I think after 2 airings, the third show was on Halloween. And just, that's not a great night.
Yeah.
For programming.
Everyone's out having fun. Yeah.
The following week, if memory serves me right, I could be wrong, but I know this did happen. It was Superstorm Sandy.
Oh, geez.
So the entire Eastern Seaboard loses its power. That will impact your ratings.
I think so. Maybe just a little. Yep. So after that, you ended up at Rev 3 Games.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about why you went there, and 2, what it was like working there.
So, I solicited a lot of offers, and there were things about Rev 3 where it was I guess the best way to put it was the least defined.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that as a positive, where it's like, okay, here's this small thing. Let's see what we can do with it. And it definitely looked like I could get my personal touch on it more substantively than sort of, say, nascent projects that were out there or very established institutions. Going back to San Francisco was appealing. My family is up here.
Yep.
I know, as expensive as San Francisco was, I know how to kind of navigate my way through the city and sort of mitigate.
And your wife, I believe, preferred to live up there as well.
Yes,
right?
yes. I think there's
a lot of weight in that.
yeah. There's a lot of weight in that, and so we came up here, and you know what? It was one of those. I'm so proud of so much of the content I did there.
You did some
but
good
I
stuff
also,
there.
yeah. I mean, it was like finally, it was like, let's see what a 9-minute review can do, and it could do really, really, really well
instead of 2.5 minutes, 3.5.
Yeah,
minutes.
just trying to sort of hit all those points.
Yep.
But oh boy, to everyone out there that streams or YouTubes, I tip my hat to you. I mean, that is, it was hard because it's a beast that needs to always be satisfied.
Yep.
And there used to be, I think, that feeling, especially in live TV, but even when we were doing stuff like X-Play, when the show's in the can, it's like, all right, we did that, and now we move on.
Yep.
And with YouTube, it's like you can always have one more video.
Oh yeah, and you always need one more video.
And I hated Nielsen ratings when I was living under them because they were so unclear what they were saying
and unfair.
Unfair. But then suddenly, when you have raw viewership numbers, I'm like, ooh, I missed the more massageable Nielsen numbers.
Things that you could spin.
Yeah.
Funny how that works. Yeah.
And that obsessive, like, okay, refresh the page.
Are we doing well enough?
Are we doing well? Are we not doing well? So I did it for about 2.5 years. Once again, I'm just incredibly proud of the work we did. I love the people that I worked with, but it was like, I can't. Like that was just a pace that was going to be there was no clear place where it could plateau. And
now, Adam, part of it though also was having to deal with the YouTube community. Am I not wrong?
Oh, that didn't help.
Yeah. There was a certain point where you kind of laid down a mea culpa about internet culture.
Yeah.
That I think a lot of people still kind of associate you with. Well, I think some people think that maybe the internet culture, the people online and internet comments may have run you off.
Yeah. No internet comment is going to run me off, but
well, not one, but maybe 50,000. Because it's something to deal with that a lot of people I don't think can understand.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, like people, when they're on Twitter, they're like, you can't say anything nuanced, and it's hard to have a conversation on Twitter. Mm-hmm. That's really true of just the internet in general.
Yeah,
like that isn't a unique thing, and to try to lay out kind of a structured argument of like, what I thought about a game or this various thing. It's not that this is so dogmatic that that this is a monolithic truism, and a lot of people would regard it that way. And as time goes on, when the majority of what comes back to you is not just vitriolic, like unwilling to just even listen or to understand, and you're breaking your ass trying to do
That's the hard part, is how much
that's where you're like, what am I doing this for?
I know.
And then, obviously the thing that happened with regard to the resolution thing, which is where it just exploded. Yep. And it was because I think it was a Sessler's something, which is like my soapbox thing.
Yep.
Where I went to an event that what was that horrible Roman game at the launch of the Xbox One? Rise.
Yeah. Son of Rome or whatever.
No, it was an attractive game.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say, and I remember looking at it and going like, oh, that looks pretty good. And then I learned it was not 1080p proper. It was somewhere in between the 7. Yeah. Maybe it was like the checkerboard thing. I don't know.
Well, back then there wasn't checkerboarding. But
there was some type
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I was trying to say in this video is that to my eye, I'm like, I thought it looked really good. It was crisp.
It did.
I like the Roman aesthetics. And it wasn't 1080p. I'm like, I think we're putting too much emphasis on these numbers.
Yeah.
Rather, and because
I mean, let's be honest, it was the best looking launch game.
Forza, Forza looked good, but then Forza always looks good. And it's always like, I want to see
Forza's easier to make it look good.
And also when things are going that fast, there's ways to hide things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I think up until that point, Sony was still touting that they were pure 1080p.
Right.
Kill zone.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and it,
so basically, you got caught up in the fanboy war.
Yeah, except this time it was crazy.
I mean, I've dealt with it so many times.
I mean, like threats against me, like people were threatening to rape my wife, and it's just like over the plastic box that does the fantasies. No, and once again, it's not like, oh my God, I'm scared. It's like, I don't have it in me. It's like, this work is hard.
It wears you down.
The game, like, I'm reviewing games and not hanging out with friends or seeing my wife just so I can get to the end of a game that I already know kind of sucks, but I got to get to the end of the game just in case in that final stretch,
that last act,
it somehow does something good.
Yeah.
And it's like, no.
People don't appreciate it. They're just looking for something to pick apart.
Yeah. And it just becomes exhausting. And it was just like, that was, the burnout was already happening. Like, just the other thing is, covering console launches is horrifying.
It is.
It is because you're absolutely and utterly at the mercy of these companies. And once again, we're trafficking in video. And this was at the point YouTube was definitely taking over, but there was still a lot of mindset where you look to print, or you look to something that was more like that could survive on text with more limited video, or could just handle screenshots. When you're doing just straight YouTube, you can't.
Yeah.
And you don't know from one day to the next if you have all this supported content.
Yep.
What makes matters even worse is there are people in an ad sales department that are selling coverage. You don't know what the coverage is.
You don't, or if you're going to be able to complete it.
Exactly. And like, that is the worst pressure in the world.
It's so much stress.
Yeah.
Because that's bottom line stuff. That's like, and if it doesn't come through, who do they come to?
Yeah. And so like, okay, so we're thinking there's gonna be 9 to 10 videos. I'm like, I can't tell you if I like,
there's no way to know. We don't have the assets. 15 Publishers can't tell us if we're gonna get assets. And they have to, and look, it's not their fault either, because they have to book that business way in advance.
Yeah, they have to.
But also, it's a big opportunity for them because it's a console launch, and it's easy to get clients to get excited around that.
Exactly.
To get Doritos or Mountain Dew to be like, yeah, we'll support you guys in your console launch for the new PlayStation. Heck yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, I was at that point, like, I honestly didn't know, like, if I was going to live to 2014 at that point. And, by the time I got to 2014, it's like, suddenly you just look at kind of the road ahead, and it's like, okay, there might not be a console launch, but it's still kind of a death march that just doesn't have any kind of clear resolution or a plateau that's happening somewhere out there. And you have the internet that's trying to, that thinks it by saying, I want to rape your wife is the way to handle being angry about resolution.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll be honest with you. When you told me that you were leaving games coverage, I didn't believe you. I thought, I'll be honest, because I know how passionate you are about it.
No, I love it. Yeah.
I mean, the conversations that we've had, like, I'll remember for the rest of my life. Like, I know that you have the fire for games. So when you told me that you were leaving games coverage, for one, I didn't believe you. I thought something had happened at Rev 3 that you couldn't talk about yet, and that you had something else lined up, and you were going to go to that new gig, and you're just going to continue on. And no, you were being honest. And instead, you started a brand new company, like almost 2 years later, called Spike Trap. Now, in between there, you hosted some stuff for E3. I think you actually did something for like Spike, I was before.
Oh yeah, I did that, and I went into the world of consultancy.
Yep, and you did the Bethesda E3 presser with Morgan, which was awesome. A nice little reunion.
That was a tough day, though. I forgot. Not because of Bethesda. That was the horrible shooting at the club in Orlando.
Yeah,
and that was. Oh, I'm glad. That's one of those times.
Focused on camera, huh?
Yeah. And it's like, boy, if we were still at G4 when that happened, I mean, it's like everyone was having to look at their, what they were showing, and like, hold on, how is this going to play?
I know. It's hard for sure.
It was tough.
So you did that. You did some consulting, and then you started your own thing, which actually had just only tangentially to do with video games, a company called Spike Trap.
Yes, and this is actually somewhat born of those final years, covering games, where I always knew this, and I had learned more and more that there's no good way to evaluate what the audience is actually saying. And I think we all know that the loudest, the most obnoxious tend to get more attention.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a trick of the brain. Two things are a trick of the brain. You tend to notice negativity more, and you kind of assume like, oh, if it's really loud, that must be representative of X number of people.
Yeah.
The only thing empirically you can say is that dude doesn't like this.
Yep, that's true.
And but look, it was two major things, really kind of struck me. One was the always online aspect to the Xbox One.
Yep.
Where I'm going to be frank, I was just somewhat skeptical about how many people were that incensed over something that was like already part of a phone.
Right.
Always being online.
Yeah.
And
people compartmentalize their tech.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
And like,
they're like, I have one set of rules for my
DRM.
cell phone. I have another set of rules for my console. Like, it's very weird.
And then obviously, like, Microsoft did not handle that well whatsoever.
Yeah.
They put out that statement that was written by clearly 100 lawyers,
right,
with about as much compassion as a room of 100 lawyers will demonstrate.
Yep.
But but they made huge material changes to a console not that long before the launch.
Yep.
Which is just not good.
It doesn't also generally up until that point had not happened.
Yeah. And it was like, whoa. The other one was the problems at E3. I'm blanking. What was the French Revolution Assassin's Creed? Unity.
Yeah.
Where in the morning of that week, they showed it off, and they showed off the co-op. And then a discussion had emerged, can you play a female character? Yep. And that continued throughout the day. Then there was a Ubisoft press conference where even I had assumed that game it was the first time they didn't have a number in the title, I think, because Black Flag was 4.
Yep.
Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Because it was just Unity, and because they started the day with the co-op, I thought it was a very different game. That one that was co-op focused.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a little strange that you can't like have some customization of the characters, at least pick some genders. And then, then they kind of demonstrate, it is a proper single player game with a cooperative angle on it. That's what you find out later in the day.
Yep.
But this internet fury and discussion have been growing. And so when they came out to talk about the game and the new hero, I can't remember who you play. I think his name is something.
I don't remember either, to be honest.
Yeah. But that almost sounded like they were being deliberately insensitive to what had transpired when probably they didn't even know.
Right.
Like,
right.
How do we solve for this problem? Because, there's ways of just kind of avoiding that PR disaster or, not changing your game so materially as to satisfy what is actually a very vocal minority in terms of your audience. And so we met up with some people, one who was just very experienced at machine learning and AI, and we taught machine learning system how people talk about video games, which is very different than how we talk in English. The classic way I like to describe it is, in no other context should you celebrate a headshot,
right,
other than video games.
Yeah.
And so more traditional English language, sort of surveyors of language, would look at headshot as a negative because it is.
But in the game space.
Exactly. And
it's satisfying.
Yeah. And someone once said that they were so frustrated
because it's really bizarre, but true.
Yeah, it really is. But, the tools that were currently available, if someone said XCOM Enemy Unknown is the shit, that is a positive. But enemy and shit immediately would flag it as a negative.
As a negative, right? Yeah.
And so we taught the system to do it, and then we could it would able to identify, okay, people are talking about this game. Here are the topics of conversation around the game, and they're trending in a positive or negative direction. And it would happen in near real time.
Yep.
And that was the thing, so that you could suddenly say, like, okay, we made the announcement here. How did people take it? And that
get an accurate reading of it.
Yeah. And what this could prevent is so many different things. One, someone on the dev team who, they're very passionate. These people care about their product. Yeah. And when people start to slam it, they might freak out and say, like, oh my God, and go online and create more trouble for themselves. Right. When actually it was, once again, they read the 3 negative comments. That were just 3 negative comments. It was to help put everything in context and help, like, just give better, more accurate data about the audience, or as I like to put it, everyone, because we always talk about everyone and we don't know who the fuck we're talking about.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
And, and they can make informed decisions. So it was also kind of my mea culpa for God knows what amount of trouble I've caused game companies.
Is it your make good? Is that what you're saying?
Over the 15 years.
Is your way of giving back?
I was charging them for it. Don't get me wrong.
So you did manage to stay in the games industry kind of tangentially, but it sounds like it wasn't enough. It wasn't good enough.
No, and the other thing is that I cannot program. I am technically I am a virtual Neanderthal when it comes. Everyone always thinks I'm good at games and tech. Yeah, and so I could sell. I had the connections and things like that. But there's only so much I was gonna be able to offer before the wheels had sort of it became its own perpetual motion machine.
Yeah.
And so, it's like, do I want to go forward? And, COVID hits. And then lo and behold, I get this text from Blair Herder.
Yeah.
and now I am.
Buddy.
Do you have time for a phone call?
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, Blair Herder, I actually worked with him at MTV when I started Game Trailers. Right. He was at MTV. Right. He was the one at
MTV 2.
He was doing some little game show thing in New York. That's right. And I was running editorial on the West Coast. And then he ended up going over to G4. So he and I kind of passed ships. We were ships passing in the night. I went to MTV from G4. He went from MTV to G4. I went from G4 to MTV. And he ended up going over there. He ended up being the host after you left for X-Play, right?
Well, and then but he was on X-Play as kind of third host.
Yeah.
Which was really, really great, especially in the beginning, because, up until that point, it was just Morgan and me. And, let's say one of us, they wanted to send, afar to cover something. It was always kind of a scramble to figure out how do we do the timing or something like that.
Yeah.
Now there was another body.
Yeah. And you could send Blair out too, and you could say
right, exactly. Yeah. So when it was like, hey, look, Atlas is doing another showcase. It's like, Blair, how are you doing?
Atlas. No offense, Atlas.
No offense, but I'm having certain memories of Judges Week.
Yeah. So Blair is actually the person who's kind of heading up the revival of G4 that's happening right now, correct?
I'm trying to remember what his title is. He is one of the people that were kind of started at the inception about the return of G4. There are other people involved. They will be revealed as time goes on. But he has become a corporate sellout since I last saw him.
Well, he's become a corporate guy. He's not really he got out of being talent and stuff like that. He's been working in marketing and things like that since he left G4.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it was announced just here in the last week, you are coming back to be a part of the new X-Play. And Adam, I don't even know if you can answer a lot of this, but I'm going to ask anyway.
Yeah, please.
Damn it. I helped create X-Play and I worked on it for 5 years. I feel entitled to ask you this
I think that's fair.
Okay. Is it going to be like the old X-Play? Is there going to be sketch comedy in the show? Or is it going to be review driven like the old X-Play was? What's the plan?
So I cannot answer that. And not even because my hands are tied this is still something that is being worked out. Okay. The analogy I will give you is, how many times have we interviewed a game developer who talks about assets in a game before they know if they're really going to make it into the shipped product?
Too many.
Now, having said that, you just pointed out comedy and reviews. And I think I can say with a fair amount of confidence that if neither of those are present in the show, it has no business being called X-Play.
Okay.
So, and then the content I've been doing has been hilarious, for B4G4. Yeah, there's been a lot of comedy, light on reviews, but it's also been light on games. Yeah. So that's so. So
you have been doing some content here. It's called B4G4, right?
Yep. Yeah. This is more or less stuff for the YouTube channel. They've just kind of opened up the Twitch channel. I'm going to be doing some stuff. I'm going to be doing something on Friday of this week.
Today.
Some stuff. Oh, that's right. That is today.
Yeah,
I should probably check my phone and see if someone's like, "Where's Sessler?" Yeah. So and kind of working with that, and then obviously that becomes kind of a fun throw the spaghetti at the wall type. Okay, let's see what this kind of content is like. What is this content like? And that will all start to inform what will become the show and other types of programming throughout the network.
Now, G4 is not going to be on TV. I think that a lot of people are confused about that. They think it's going to be on, at least at first, it's not going to be on DirecTV or cable or anything. It's going to be strictly digital, right?
Now I am going to give you more of a patterned
corporate
response. they are very aware of that media consumption has changed in terms of its delivery systems and platforms.
Okay.
And I will just kind of leave it at that. There are things. There's so many things to be announced. Obviously, COVID is going on, and so there's also like, okay, we don't want to like spill everything now because there's still some time that has to go
you got
forward.
plenty of time to build.
So and things once again, you want to make sure that like it's asset locked before you start to talk about them.
Sure.
So I would say stay tuned on that one.
Okay. Is there any rough release date for like X-Play when you guys start producing it? The Attack of the Show is also coming back.
Yeah. No. And once again, that's not because there aren't goals, ambitions, and whatever. It's like, boy, if there was one thing, we're not a Kojima game. We would like to say this is the date and it stays at that date, for that time. But there's just a lot of factors that have to be evaluated before you can say like, yes, we will be up and running. So actually, the original G4, remember they had to delay it by a week and they just aired Pong.
That's right. Yeah, for a week.
So, as clever as that
remember
was,
it though,
exactly.
It made an impact.
But that's still not a desirable situation to find yourself in. It's like it's always great when you find a way to kind of.
They made lemonades out of lemon.
Yeah,
absolutely. In that case, now Adam, obviously the internet. I can tell you firsthand that YouTube comments have not gotten any better.
Oh, I know.
People have not become nice suddenly. Do you think you're going to be able to handle it?
Yeah. I think the other thing is, especially because of the work I did at Spike Trap.
Yeah.
The douchebags make up a far smaller percentage of the conversation than I realized.
You've convinced yourself that they're the vocal minority. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That
Good. I tried to tell you that, by the way, when you told me that you were leaving, and I'm like, you're getting overrun by like 10 dudes, man. Like,
yeah. I mean, it's. I know that. Also, now I don't care.
Yeah.
You remember back in the old days where we loved to just kind of just like tweak, all the kids that loved anime, especially like Dragon Ball Z and we always insulted Sonic's friends. And people just were like, why?
Yeah.
Now that's everybody.
Yeah.
And I am the guy telling everyone to get off my lawn. No, it hasn't gotten better. But on the flip side, the most interesting thing is the reception that the announcement of G4 has received.
It's been glowing pretty much.
Yeah, and people, it was just this weird confluence of events. One thing that I've talked about this in the past is that X-Play's ratings were good in the later years. They weren't astonishing, but that's also because we only valued men 18 to 35.
Yeah,
and
the show had changed a lot too. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but from 12 to 17. Oh, we were like one of the strongest things in all of television.
And they're all adults now. Now they're the 18 to 30.
Exactly. And then with COVID, obviously there was even more of a like kind of a nostalgia kick. I think everyone was like, I need my comfort. I need something like that. So before the announcement of G4's return was made, I would go on Twitter into my replies and it was just absurd.
Yeah.
They're like, oh man, I wish G4 would come back. I accused Blair and some others. I'm like, do you have people that are in
maybe they hired Spike Trap to like set you up?
Yeah. Are you in a bunch of Reddits like seeding something out? And they're like, and I remember someone was like, didn't want to get expectations too high. I'm like, I don't think you understand. Like, it's like someone just saturated the ground with gasoline and you're just having a smoke and you're just going to give a little spark and this thing is going to conflagration. And that's, that's exciting. And I think it was one of those that now there's been so much distance between where I am now and 2012, which is when, and the show that is like, we were kind of a very important part of a lot of people's lives.
Yeah.
And
I think a lot of people have missed you too, Adam, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of people will be protective of you. Now, because they lost you once already.
Yeah. Well, like once again, the internet isn't like that part I'm not worried about. Obviously it is a big, exciting world out there. Yes. With many strong opinions, but it was so much fun to go back and do it. And like just doing my first VO where I did the 3, 2.
Yep.
And just kind of started reading again. And I'm like, oh yeah, this feels familiar, comfortable,
back in the
like,
saddle.
Yeah, it's like that sock that just like has through sweat and grime, it's form fitted to your foot.
Now I'm curious, Adam, have you checked out Venn, which is kind of the latest
I'm
attempt to
aware.
mimic
Yeah.
G4. The network has not. It's done horrible. Let's just be honest. Like the week after the network debuted, most of their shows were getting like 200 to 600 people watching them.
And is this on Twitch?
It's Twitch only. Yeah.
I saw a touch of it here or there. Look, I don't like. I'm obviously with a competitor now, so
Yeah.
I don't want to be professionally insensitive, but it's very tricky. This kind of goes back to what we were talking about. It's in the spike I was trying to address is that everyone starts to come up with their idea of what the audience is, and then you
Yep.
kind of build towards that audience. And sometimes you understand, sometimes you don't. I mean, I think one of the big philosophies we had at X Play, this might even been back all the way extended play, is I always believe that no teenager wanted content. Oh, I'm not supposed to say content. Sorry, Scorsese. Wanted something that was written for them.
Yeah.
Like no one at 15 wants something that has been designed perfectly for a 15-year-old. No, you want to be
They
treated
want
like
the
an
stuff
adult.
that's made for the 30 and 40-year-old guys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you want a 15-year-old, you write for a 21-year-old.
That's a very astute observation.
And you make everything aspirational.
Yeah.
And so always can be a little bit above their heads rather than something that, because also teenagers can smell. When we were teenagers, we could smell pandering. These kids are so much more media savvy.
Yeah.
They can see it coming from miles and miles and miles away. I am not saying that Venn is pandering, but what I'm trying to sort of illuminate is it's a very tricky alchemy.
Well, the biggest mistake I think a lot of, and I'll say it, content creators make now, particularly when you have a big budget and you're trying to do something bigger than like a Patreon or whatever you're trying to grow, is that they assume that influencers are going to drive eyeballs. It never works. People like influencers on the platforms that they're on.
Yeah.
They like Ninja on Twitch. You put him on some corny TV show where he stands there and like does raps. Nobody cares and no one shows up.
I'm sorry, does this show exist?
Oh, they've tried stuff like this. Yes.
It's like Ninja Raps, Ninja Raps.
No, have you watched Ben? I mean,
no, once again, I dropped in.
I know you are reticent to criticize Venn.
Yeah.
I'm not. Venn is basically influencer TV. They went out and they found kids that have a lot of followers on TikTok or wherever. And they're like, hey, if they'll just tweet out, I'm on this new show, people will show up and watch them. That's not how it works.
And what you're pointing out, I think, is very, very important. Sort of what streamer culture, what that is about in the most extreme way, is a complete collapsing of performer and audience.
Yeah,
like the wall that separates them is very, very
razor
small.
thin. Yeah, that's why people like it.
No, and people love it, and there's a place for that. I am not. Yeah. Where tech TV, I think, was somewhat revolutionary, and I would say especially with screensavers and call for help. Leo was at the helm of something like that. It started to contract that distance? Like had rarely ever, if ever, happened on television.
It still doesn't happen on television.
No, it really does. Like there is a huge distance. Like I am, and YouTube stuff kind of falls somewhere in the middle. And yet you need to appreciate not just your audience, but your medium. Marshall McLuhan, with one of the most famous and important lines of the late 20th century, the medium is the message. And, you need to kind of tailor things with a very strong understanding of sort of what because online streaming is very different than sitting down. It is still a lean forward as opposed to the lean back, which you get with television. And it's the difference, I think, between console and play and PC game playing.
To me, is just you hire talent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Also, yeah. You need somebody.
You hire people who are good at what they do. You don't hire people based upon how many followers they have somewhere. It just because that traffic does not follow them everywhere they go, and you're not going to get anyone interested if they're not good at what they're doing. Just throwing somebody from TikTok on camera and trying to have them read a teleprompter, it's not going to end well. And it hasn't ended well, at least not for Venn. So it's encouraging to hear your perspective kind of on what's maybe going to happen with the future of the new G4.
Yeah, and the one thing is that there are people there at the helm of it that watched G4, that liked G4, and that's the part that has. Because you probably are wondering, it's like when G4 came a calling, I was like, let me just go back to no. I was absolutely and utterly convinced with a couple of calls that like these guys know what they're doing. this is something that I would love to get on board with. It was just kind of a perfect confluence like that.
Well, Adam, I think I can speak for literally everyone, except for your 5 haters. Literally, probably 5 haters who just terrorized you. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that we're all very excited that you're back home,
that's very
coming back into the industry. You're doing what you should have been doing all along. It's a shame that we lost you, honestly, for like 8 years. It really is. I missed your voice in the industry. I think everyone did.
Thank you.
So I'm very, very glad to hear that you're coming back.
I am so excited that I missed a console launch during COVID. Oh, that is a bullet. I was like, oh, this is what Plastic Man feels like.
We pulled it off somehow at Sifted. It was a lot of work. Production right now is a lot of work. It's just, it's hard.
It's very hard.
But that's the other part. G4 is going to be coming online when, everyone's getting vaccinated. We're going to be able to do production normally, probably by the end of the year. So it should be all good. Yeah. Adam, before you go, we ask everyone who comes on 3 Night Weekend, what are they playing? What are they watching, and what are they drinking this weekend?
Okay, so what am I playing? I have got to finish Cyberpunk
2077.
Yeah, I was one of those people that actually, on my own efforts, tracked down a 3090 for my rig.
Oh.
And so I get to finally see what... Yeah,
lucky you.
I know. I was like, how did I pull this off?
Yeah, I don't know how you did.
Friend of a friend of a friend going, you have any to buy? And so so it looks right. The bugs are nominal. And the mainly more
PS5 version runs pretty well if you're running the PlayStation version on PS5.
Yeah. So
they all crash, but
I'm just really fascinated right now with just sort of a problem I'm seeing in the design of open world games, where these games have got to decide if the player should do as much or everything and scale their game to that. Like maybe that instead of having hard, easy, or whatever, it's like, do you plan to play a lot of this game or just the story or just this, and start to scale the progression? Because I'm trying to do as much as I can because I find that interesting. And now I'm just like, okay, it's not even on hard mode, they're just bullet sponges. And I'm like,
they just take more damage. Yeah.
And like
you take less.
This game did not assume that I could actually fill out my skill trees. The way I'm doing it. So I'm doing that. But the more fun thing I'm doing is I'm playing with my 9-year-old godson. He's at his house and we're playing through the Sackboy game on PlayStation 5. That game is so much fun with other people.
Cool. I'll be honest with you. I have not even tried it yet. I haven't played it.
It's a platformer.
I know.
It's a platformer, and the physics that used to drive us crazy in the platforming of Little Big Planet, don't worry. They
fixed it.
They jump like normal people.
Great.
That are made of yarn and jump.
Okay, so that's what you're playing. What are you watching?
WandaVision.
WandaVision.
I am down with that show.
It seems to be polarizing.
Oh yeah, but as someone, I don't know how you feel. Although I kind of see a look in your eye. As someone who grew up with UHF stations, and like I was well versed in all of those old sitcoms.
Yep.
I love those early episodes. Obviously, it's becoming a little more Marvel. Yeah, it is.
I think that's been the problem for a lot of people. They watch the first couple episodes and they're like, "What is going on?" Stick with it.
Well, also, stick with it and go watch some old Nick at Night stuff. Like you'll understand.
They're not going to do that, Adam. But
no. But it's just the first 2 episodes are just kind of genius in that, like, they captured the look and spirit, but still kept those characters who. I think it becomes
those first episodes become more genius as you get further into the series as well.
I would agree. The other thing I'm excited to see, which I meant to see last weekend, was the show. The movie Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yeah, I haven't watched that yet.
I've been reading so many wonderful reviews about it.
That's one of those films that was supposed to be released in theaters.
And I was so excited for that movie because I know the story. It's about of course I'm going to just blank on the name, but the Black Panther leader in Chicago who was killed by the Chicago PD back in the 60s. But this is about a member of that Chicago chapter who actually betrayed him, and it's told through his eyes. And so you get this kind of amazing piece of history.
Reviewed from it. Very well.
Very well. So I'm excited for that.
And what are you drinking?
What am I drinking? Let's see.
Have you been drinking through the pandemic alcohol?
I've actually had a couple dry periods where I'm like,
I have hardly drank at all.
Oh, good for you, buddy.
I mean, it's just me and my wife, and she really doesn't drink. It's like if I sat around by myself and got hammered, I would feel bad about myself, and my wife might leave me. So I've not been doing a lot of alcohol drinking since this all started.
The pandemic hasn't been it. I would say like that election kind of was like, I don't know how sensitive I want to be to everything around me. And then on the 6th of January, I was like, maybe
Crack
if
out
I'm
the
drunk,
scotch.
this will make more sense.
So what were you drinking on that day?
Oh, that day? Oh, no. Anything that would make me not want to scream.
Yeah.
that was pretty much. But yeah, right now I have a Japanese whiskey, and that's what I have on a good day, and just regular bullet bourbon on a normal day.
All right. So Adam, where can people find you on Twitter?
On Twitter, it's at Adam Sessler.
You're lucky you have your actual real name.
Yeah, I mean, this was I felt I was late in joining it, but I guess there's only one other guy I know that has my name, and he's in Israel.
Yeah, and he hadn't snagged it yet.
I guess he hadn't done it yet, or yeah.
And then what about like G4's YouTube channel and Twitch channel?
So they're all under the G4T, like youtube.com/G4TV. But there is an XPlay channel. There is an AOTS channel. Most of my stuff is going to go on the XPlay channel, but then stuff that's more kind of about the network. There's some pretty funny videos.
No, there's some really funny videos. Yeah.
And that I think is living under the G4 network.
Okay.
And as it stands right now, most of the new content is dropping on Fridays. And so
it should be some new stuff up today.
Yes. Actually, this is going to be it's a fun one that's up. We talk about the Resident Evil. Is it 8?
Village 8, whatever.
Yeah, whatever that demo was. Yeah. And we do a list of the most scary things in Resident Evil games that have nothing to do with horror.
Oh, that's a good list.
Yeah, what you buying?
That's a good list. I'm gonna now that we're done, I'm gonna go watch this right after I get done listening to 3 Night Weekend. Listen, Adam, thanks a million for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
I might owe you a lot, and so thank you for coming on. And again, you can find Adam on Twitter at Adam Sessler. All right, now that you know what Adam's up to this weekend, it's time to spin you around the world of entertainment for the next 3 days.
Games!
Oh man, it continues to be really slim pickings for video games. February has been a rough month, but there is one brand new game launching this weekend. It's called Gravity Heroes. It's a side-scrolling shooter that, you guessed it, uses gravity as a mechanic. It's launching for PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. There's also a demo you can check out on pretty much every platform. If you're looking for something a little more scary, The Sinking City launches on PlayStation 5 this weekend. And then the odd game Thomas Was Alone is also available for Switch.
TV and film!
As always, if you want more passive entertainment and just want to chill on the couch, there are plenty of options this weekend. On Amazon Prime, there's a brand new series called Tell Me Your Secrets that launches this weekend. It's from the executive producer of Big Little Lies. Lots of big stars in that one. On Netflix, there's a new series called Tribes of Europa. It basically follows 3 factions as they battle for a futuristic Europe. Looks interesting to say the least. And then there's a new movie launching on Netflix called I Care a Lot. If you're looking for one of those films that was supposed to launch in theaters, but instead it's just coming to VOD, The Mauritanian stars Jodie Foster, where she plays a defense attorney trying to free an unjustly imprisoned man. It's based on a memoir, so kind of a doc pick. And then finally, For All Mankind Season 2 launches on Apple TV. If you've been getting into the whole Mars rover saga over the last couple of days, NASA just landed another rover on Mars. If that's got you all excited, then check that out.
Music!
A really slow week for album releases, but if you're an indie music fan, we have a big one. Mogwai has a brand new album that comes out today called As the Love Continues. Reviews have been great. The band has been at it for 25 years, so if you don't know them by now, this is a great time to figure it out. Also available today, a brand new album from S.G. Lewis. If you're looking for something a little more upbeat, his funky house tracks will definitely get it done.
Sports!
Like every weekend, there's plenty of sports to keep your butt planted on the couch. We're going to go day by day here on Friday. The Genesis Invitational kicks off. It's running all weekend on CBS. That is the weekend's big golf tournament. But probably the biggest sporting event of the weekend is the final round of the Australian Open. Unfortunately, the times for that are a little rough. Both the men's and women's finals happen at 3:30 a.m. Eastern, 12:30, just past midnight, on the West Coast. So you might want to just wait until you wake up the next morning to check those out, but that's going down this weekend. And then also on Friday tonight, the Utah Jazz take on the LA Clippers at 10 p.m. Eastern. Again, the Jazz, the best team in the West. The Clippers, one of the best teams in the West. Should be a great game. On Saturday, it's all about Premier League soccer. At 7:25 a.m. on NBC Sports Network, it's Southampton versus Chelsea. And then later on at 12:30 Eastern on NBC proper, it's Liverpool versus Everton. And then the big hockey game on Saturday, it's the Vegas Golden Knights versus the Colorado Avalanche, two of the best teams in the West. And that game happens at 3 p.m. Eastern on NBC. So you can just keep it tuned to that one channel for the best of sports on Saturday. And then wrapping up the weekend on Sunday, there's a big college basketball game, Michigan at Ohio State at 1 p.m. on CBS. And then in the NHL, it's the Flyers versus the Bruins at 3 p.m., and that's on NBC. And then back to the NBA, the Celtics take on the Pelicans at 3:30 p.m. on ABC. And then it's the Nets versus the Clippers at 8 p.m. on ESPN.
Esports.
It's been tough for esports over the last 12 months with the pandemic going on, but this weekend there's something huge going on online. BlizzConline, is happening all weekend. In addition to brand new information on Overwatch 2 and all of Blizzard's other games like Diablo 4, there's also a bunch of esports tournaments going on for things like Hearthstone and the original Overwatch. And again, it's going on all weekend, and it's completely free. Also this weekend, the IEM Katowice 2021 $500,000 StarCraft tournament is going down. Thanks for checking out 3-Night Weekend from Sifted Games at sifted.net. If you like the show and you want to get it when it's hot and fresh, head to patreon.com/sifted and give us a pledge. If you want to know when the show is posted for free, follow us on Twitter at Sifted Games. And if you want to reach me, you can find me on Twitter at Dinfire. We'll see you next week when we talk to Tommy Tallarico. Until then, I'm Shane Satterfield reminding you that every weekend is a 3-Night Weekend.